The majority of people are slaves, not to some system or some all powerful oppressor who's keeping them from living their best lives and being all that they can be, but to themselves. They attach these labels to themselves or adopt these habits or take on these beliefs or tell themselves all kind of stories that prevent them from ever truly utilizing and making the most of the freedoms that they have. They pick up vices, whether that be food, drugs, porn, women, video games, anything along those lines, and they wind up living in this self-made prison that is ran by these things. People who need alcohol or need drugs or even need to talk to women, watch porn, whatever the case may be, in order to feel like themselves are slaves to these things. You are slaves to your desires, you are slaves to your urges, you are slaves to whatever it is that pops into your head. That's what happens when you don't have the power to tell yourself no. You wind up being controlled by your whims and whatever random thoughts or ideas spring into your mind, and you have to go do these things because that's who it is that you have cultivated yourself into. The alcoholic is no more free than someone who is in jail. They just don't have the same walls around them. They do have walls, but they're more metaphorical than physical. Same thing for the drug addict, the person who needs their high or needs their fix or doesn't feel right. They are slaves to all of these substances, and these substances become their masters, which prevent them from being able to live their best lives. And to make matters worse, they attach all of these other labels or all of these other ideas to themselves, adopt these other ideas like they have some sort of disease, or it's not specifically something that they can help, or it might have been outside of their control. But these ideas are A, false, and B, just further strengthening the chains that you have shackled yourself to. You're making it harder to escape from these things. And as long as these are things that you believe that you need to continue your life and or don't have the power to stop doing, then you are always going to need these things to continue on your life. You are always going to need the liquor, whether or the beer or the wine or the champagne or whatever the fuck it is that you drink. You're going to need the crack, the meth, the weed. You're going to need the women. You're going to need the porn. You're going to need the video games. You're going to need the Netflix shows in order to feel whole. And anytime that you place your sense of self-worth or ability to be at peace into some sort of outside or external object, substance, even concept, even another person, you are always going to be a slave to that thing. Your freedom is something that is internal. Until you are good with yourself, then you are never truly going to be free, which is why, while as long as you cling to these vices, you are never going to have true freedom to allow yourself to do whatever it is that you truly want to do in your life, because you're always going to answer to these various substances. And it's not just the substances and the people who lack the discipline. It is people who attach these labels to themselves as well, whether that be that they're an introvert or they're depressed or they have ADD or anxiety, any of these things. They are slaves to these beliefs that they are assigning themselves, because every single label that you give yourself comes with a limit. Every time you call yourself something, every time you define yourself by one of these things, you're placing yourself inside of a box. And what do boxes have? Walls. And the walls are telling you what it is that you can't do. So when you tell yourself that you are an introvert, you are telling yourself that you can't do extroverted shit. You're telling yourself that you can't be outgoing. You're telling yourself that you can't just go out and speak to random people or walk into a room and be comfortable around a bunch of other people. When you tell yourself that you're depressed, you're telling yourself that there is something wrong with you that is preventing you from being happy. When you tell yourself that you have some sort of anxiety disorder, you are telling yourself that it is something that is outside of your control and not something that can be affected by your decisions, your actions, or your mindset. Same thing when you tell yourself that you have ADD, or telling yourself that you do not have the ability to focus or to do certain things or to prioritize certain things. Some people would take that and say, what is it? Time blindness, and they can't be on time. So All of these labels are, again, boxing you in, and your boxes are putting you within walls. You're telling yourself what it is that you can and cannot do. And true freedom is being able to do whatever it is that's in your mind, whatever it is that pops into your head, so to speak. So if you want, if it's in your head that you should be able to focus, that you should be happy, that you should be able to talk to people, as long as you have these labels that you operate under, you are never going to be able to do those things. So you wind up becoming a slave to the labels that you assign yourselves, a slave to all of these random beliefs that are preventing you from being the best version of yourself and living the life that you could live, and living the story that you want to write to the best of your ability, because you have included in your programming that that is not some things that you can do. So you become a slave to your depression, because your depression dictates that you act and feel a certain way and do certain things. It also tells you that you can't do certain things. You become a slave to your ADD, ADHD, whatever the fucking difference between the two is, because that is another thing that is telling you how it is that you should operate. You become a slave to your personality test, your INTJ, or whatever other fucking collection of letters it is that people are. Your type A personality, your right brain, your left brain. You become a slave to all of these things, because these labels are now dictating the decisions that you feel that you can make, and the actions that you believe that you have the power to take. And then there are other people who make themselves slaves to certain narratives. The idea that women are only into men who are over 6 feet tall, and they live their life as a 5'4" or 5'6" or some shit person. So they believe that they can't live to the live their lives to the fullest extent because of their height, because of something that is out of their control, excuse me. Same thing goes for the people who say that their race is preventing them from getting farther ahead, that if they weren't black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the fucking case may be, then they would be much farther along in life. But society looks unfavorably upon these things, and it's harder for these people. So they become slaves to these narratives, because they have all of these things in their mind that are preventing them from getting ahead, and these are things that they can't affect. If you truly believe that you can't do better in life because of the color of your skin, then you aren't even going to try to do any of the things necessary to get better in life, because you don't believe it to be possible. And why would you try to do some shit that's difficult if you don't believe that it's going to work out? When you walk through the world with this belief, you are shortchanging yourself in every situation that you were in. If you go to a job and you believe that jobs aren't gonna, or might not be interested in hiring you because you're black, then when you go to your interview and it doesn't work out and they go with someone else, you're immediately going to assume it's because of racism. And what that does is prevent you from self-analyzing and working on the things that you actually need to work on, and solving the things that are your actual problem, and figuring out what it is that you could have done better moving forward. Maybe you could have spoken better. Maybe you could have dressed better. Maybe you could have groomed yourself better. Maybe you could have made more eye contact. Maybe you could have been better prepared to answer questions. Maybe you could have asked some questions in return. Maybe you could have sat up straighter. Maybe your body language is off. There's a myriad of things that it could have been that is in your control, but because of what it is that you have told yourself, you believe that there's nothing that you can do about it, because the one thing that you can't change is your skin color. The one thing that you can't change is your ethnic background, your race, whatever the fuck it is that you would like to call it. So when you put the power of these things on something that you cannot change, then you are preventing yourself from ever being better. It's not society in the way that you believe it is. It's your belief that society is operating in the way that you believe it is that makes you fall in line with these things. You are a slave to the master that is your belief in racism, more so than you are to racism in and of itself. Because if you take that away and move through the world as though these things are not what it is that's holding you back, then you give yourself the ability and the desire to self-analyze and figure out what it is that you can do better and what it is that you can affect, because you can always do something different. Because sticking with the exact same thing, there are people of all different races in all kinds of jobs. So if they got hired, you can get hired. So if they got hired, that means that they must have done something or been qualified in a way that you weren't, and it wasn't specifically their skin that prevented them from doing so, because they did it. They weren't prevented at all. So maybe it's not your skin that prevented you from doing so. But when you believe it is, you will always be a slave to that belief, and you will have to live within the guidelines that it allows you to exist in. Same thing, excuse me, for the height thing. When you go talk to some women, if you believe in the back of your mind that because you're not over 6 feet, then she's not going to want to have anything to do with you, then you are manifesting that. You are attracting that to yourself because that's how you're conducting yourself. You're not even truly going to try. But if you if you take that away, then you know that you have to do all of these other things. You have to be confident, charismatic, funny, nice, a good conversationalist, interesting, all of those things. You can affect every single one of those things. And if you take a look out into the rest of the world, and you will see, excuse me, that there are short men with women. There are short men doing successful shit. There are short men doing all kinds of shit. If you look at fucking hell, mad famous people are fucking short, and that clearly didn't fucking stop them. So it's not stopping you specifically. Your belief in that is what it is that's stopping you. But you are a slave to that belief. You are a slave to that narrative. You are a slave to that idea. Just like everyone else is a slave to their substances, or a slave to their pastimes, a slave to their pleasures, a slave to their escapism, a slave to their disorders, a slave to their labels. All of these people are walking around with the ability to do whatever it is that they would like to do, but they are standing in their own way by adopting these habits or these beliefs or these narratives that are preventing them from actively doing so. The only thing that's standing in your way is you and the things that you fill your mind with. Because at the end of the day, all of the shit starts in your mind. It all starts with your thoughts. It all starts with your beliefs. And when your beliefs are that you can't do some shit, then you're never going to be able to do some shit. When you believe that going to the gym isn't going to get you in shape, then you're not going to go to the gym and do the shit that you need to do to get in shape. Because contrary to what people believe, nobody wants to go to the fucking gym all of the time. And it's those days that you don't want to go that are going to make the difference. And if you don't believe that those days that you don't want to go are actually going to work, then you're not going to go. You're not going to deny yourself the food that you want if you don't believe that doing so is going to help you lose the weight that you want to lose. You're not going to give up your fun of going to the club or going to the bar or playing video games or watching Netflix in order to prioritize doing some work if you don't believe that that work is going to pay off in the end. You're not going to go put yourself out there talking to random women if you believe that random women aren't going to like you because of your height. And all of your limiting beliefs, which is exactly what it is, these things are beliefs that prevent you from moving further than where it is that you are in life, beliefs that stop you from doing things. As long as these things exist, then you are always going to be a slave to these ideas until you get rid of that shit, until you get rid of the negative self-talk, until you get rid of the idea that you can't do something because of something that's beyond your control, or the idea that your past is somehow affecting your present, or the way that you were born is preventing you from doing this other shit, or that you're not feeling right because something is wrong with the chemistry in your brain. Until you get rid of all of that shit and start focusing on what it is that you can affect and taking accountability for your situation and looking around at the rest of the world for proof of all of the things that you could do, because you could find anybody in whatever the fuck it is that your situation, your particular predicament is, who has done some shit that you want to do. They could be your exact height, race, from a terrible neighborhood with the same brain disorder that you believe yourself have to be, and they're killing it in fucking life. If they could do it, you can too. But the reason that they did and the reason that you aren't is because they believe that they were able to. They are free. You believe that you cannot. You are a slave.